This is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernandez. Today our guests are from El Hogar del Niño, or the Home of the Child, an organization that has served children and their families for more than 40 years. And though their roots are humble, they offer quality educational and home service programs, among other things. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
No, great having you here. Before the show, I was saying that education certainly is one of my passions and obviously one of yours.
Yeah.
What is it that drew you to El Hogar del Niño? Mario, let's start with you, please.
Well, just by way of a brief introduction, I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of El Hogar del Niño, and I'm moving into my second year there. You know, I've always been drawn towards service. As I was thinking about the question earlier, you know, my dad worked in with migrant workers. He was a representative of the state in ensuring that migrant workers had rights.
Right.
This was in the 1970s.
This was in the Chicago area?
This
or
was
what?
actually, so I was born in Nebraska, and I lived there. My family's largely migrant workers, and so we sort of migrated from Texas to Nebraska. And so he went to high school, went to college, and then was able to come back and work in this capacity. And I think even though I was really young, I was very much inspired by that somehow on a level that I maybe you know, didn't comprehend at the time. So I have always been drawn towards service, and in particular youth, and working with children. And you know, I love El Hogar del Niño. I love the work I do. I love the children. I can tell you, when I first started working there, I was working as a consultant for a few months. I remember very clearly, I'll never forget when I fell in love with the organization. It was a winter, and I was getting ready to leave, and I noticed a lot of our parents coming up. So it was 5 o'clock in the evening. They were coming to pick up their children. It's cold out, and you can see the hope and the joy on their faces of wanting to see their children, and also the weary, right? Because you worked a long day, you dropped your children off at 7 in the morning, and now you're coming back. And so it was that moment of identity, because I could identify with that, having grown up in that way.
Of the struggle.
Right, of the struggle as well.
Everyday struggle.
Yeah. And so from that moment on, I've been in love with the organization, and I love this work. So,
And you're executive director.
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's an honor. It is an honor to serve.
Sure sounds like it. And our next guest, Eddie Soto, Heriberto, but people call you Eddie.
I go by Eddie, that's right, that's right.
And you are the treasurer of the board.
Yes,
right?
I am.
Tell us about, you know, most people say, well, I don't have time to work on a board or serve it at the capacity. What brought you to this organization, and how do you feel about it?
Sure. So I started serving the board back in 2010, and at the time I was finishing up getting my master's work, or my master's, I should say, completed from the University of Chicago. And I was introduced to the organization through one of my internships that I had done. And at the time, El Hogar was going through a transition, and it just so happened that my skill set, my background in finance was something that was needed at the time. And so we were able to come together, and I was able to help out and set things on our positive course that we're now on. And again, similarly to some of what Mario had mentioned, you know, it's not just sort of a cognitive experience where, you know, like, oh yeah, I want to serve the community because it's a good thing, but it's also certainly something that reaches my heart. And specifically, growing up in Houston, Texas, primarily immigrant community there, I saw a lot of opportunity or potential that went unfulfilled. And so by working in early childhood education, which we have now learned that there's so many positive outcomes, you know, in terms of research, in terms of longitudinal outcomes, both societal but as well as economic. You know, early childhood education is one of the few interventions that we know that can generate a 7 to 10% return. And that sounds like small, but relative to everything else that we're investing in, where it's just a black hole, we're wasting money.
Right.
This is one of the few that there's actually, you know, a positive economic gain. And so, so this is just a fascinating field to be in. It's growing, it's developing. We're learning more about brain development, and so this is something that I'm personally passionate about.
Okay. So let's go ahead, Mario.
Well, I would just add to that. You know, I think we're really fortunate on that we're on the early side of the life cycle. So you know, if we can have even just a small impact at the beginning of life, the trajectory can really, in terms of outcomes, can really be improved for our children. You know, and Eddie alluded to some of the research that's very clear right now. One of the things we do know is that about 80% of brain development occurs between the ages of 0 and 3. So if you think about
80%.
80%.
Wow.
So if you think about that.
I wish I could go back in time. And
Yeah, right? Yeah, me too.
That's what people say, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of that has to do with using a lot of language in the classroom, having a nurturing environment as well, and reducing stress for children, right? So, and we focus on all those things at Hogar del Niño.
Okay, so you're saying, what were the points you said?
So 80% of brain development happens between the ages of 0 and 3.
And how do you work on helping that development?
Yeah.
You brought us points. Reducing stress was one of them.
Reducing stress, and using a lot of language in the classroom and in the home.
Okay, tell me about that point, because that's
Sure.
something I hear, and I've seen signs in Spanish and in English, and I don't fully understand what they're suggesting or trying to tell people.
So
go first.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
go first, yeah.
So there's something called the 30 million word gap, right? And so the understanding there, based on longitudinal study, is that over the course of a child's early lifetime, right, from 0 to 3, those that are wealthier as compared to those that are have fewer resources, there's a gap of 30 million words, right, between those two groups of people by the age of 3.
30 million?
30 million words. That they've heard 30 million fewer words. And so if 80%, if that's true, and 80% of your brain development happens between 0 and 3, you know, it's pretty easy to see that it's critical to use a lot of language in the home and in the classroom. So.
Yeah, and what I want to add to that, in the 30 million, I think is also
That's a huge,
subtext.
that's a huge
It
number.
is, it is. But it's also subtext for basically, I think if we want to pull back the lens here, brain development, and what we're talking about here, and 80% brain development, is the synapses, right? So it's at that age that a lot of the bridges, if you will, are being
Between
made.
the neurons
Yeah,
in the brain?
exactly. And forgive me, I'm totally bastardizing this because I'm not a neurologist, but from what I understand, my humble understanding of
As
this.
simple, I mean, for our audience, as simple as you can explain it, just to make it some
Right.
sense.
No, but basically those little bridges that help your brain make connections to different things start happening at that age. But it's not just purely what we call cognitive or hard skills, so like the math, reading, words. It's also the relational. So for example, if I see in your face concern or worry or and can understand it and do something about it, then I'm in a much more beneficial place where I can benefit myself or the environment socially. Because if I can read, like, oh, you look tired, just having that acknowledgement, that understanding, that brain synapse, that like, oh, when someone looks like this, this is what's going on with them, then you can kind of work with that. And actually, you know, what the research is showing, it's just so fascinating that the early childhood education we're talking about, I know we're kind of going into words, but it's not just words, it's also social skills.
Okay.
And then that those are the things that actually carry on throughout your life, and that's what creates the positive social but also economic outcomes. So less prone to risk-taking behavior, less prone to getting into trouble with law, averting some of the early teen pregnancy, and also, but because of that, because you're on a not having trouble with the law, you're also able to get jobs, and again, if you're able to be attuned to your people or your circumstance, then you're better able to navigate your work environment. So again, those are all of those things that build up to positive outcomes.
So if I could just add to that also just a little bit, I think I can boil that.
This is a great conversation.
Yeah, it's really fun. We're clearly very passionate about
Yes.
You could, in a sense, kind of boil that down to a couple things just for the for folks who are watching. You know, there's the cognitive piece, and then there's the character piece or the soft skills that Eddie was talking about. Both of those are critical for early childhood development. The cognitive piece clearly relates to the 30 million word gap, right? Using a lot of language. the character piece, as it's called in research, or soft skills, are how do you relate to one another? Do you have good interpersonal skills? And the platform for that is being built between 0 to 3, 0 to 5, right?
Wow.
And so your ability to go out and get a job, pick up on social cues, right? Is this like you were saying?
Knowing how to
is
read
critical.
a situation or people.
Right. So
like
the
you were saying.
Exactly. The foundation for that happens in that space. And so this work is just critical. It really is. I don't know that there's more important work to be done right now, to be honest.
So
that's my perspective.
You're actually putting the call out there to recruit more people to do this kind
Absolutely,
of work. Or get
yeah,
more funding.
yeah.
Well, yeah, certainly funding is certainly a need, but I think awareness. I think that particularly with the Latino community, there's so much that needs to happen around awareness and understanding. So you know, and fulanita, you know, will want, you know, they have little Jorgito, you know, to like, hey man, can you take care of my kid? Like, okay, well we can take care of that, but it's not just about taking care of your kid.
Right.
And so often, particularly, and you know, I experienced this myself personally, is that I was left off with my grandparents. God bless my grandparents. Love them. They're fantastic, wonderful people. But their capacity to be able to sort of expand and build those 30 million words and to enrich the experiences. And then again, remember I said social skills? So if being exposed to other kids that are in my social realm, if you will, and being able to work with that, like those are the skills, those are the experiences that one cannot easily get just being left off or dropped off at their grandparents. And now people will probably say like, whoa, that's great and all, and I certainly want to provide the best, you know, start for my kid.
Right.
But that costs money. Well, but that's why El Hogar is here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. So how does El Hogar del Niño help nurture that type of environment and encourage that type of environment outside of its walls?
Yeah, so that is, I was going to say, you picked up exactly on what I was going to segue into from Eddie's comment about his abuelita, you know, helping to raise him, which is that at El Hogar del Niño, we have two primary vehicles by which we educate children and train them and prepare them for kindergarten. One is center-based. So we have our center at 1710 South Loomis Street in Pilsen. And there we serve about 345 children between 0 to 12. We have an after-school program as well.
Every year, every semester?
It's an all-day program and it's full-year program, so every day.
Wow.
So that's part of the work we're doing.
It's quite a lot of children.
It is a lot. It is a lot. But you know, we have good ratios in the classroom. You know,
what is the ratio, by the way?
Well, right now it depends on the age in the classroom, and but in general we have 2 teachers for 12 children in our classroom, and sometimes 3.
That's a great ratio.
It is a good ratio, and there's pressure in the field right now to move even further, to have 8 children in a classroom. And we're actually developing through a capital grant that we won recently, an innovation room. So we're going to be having our one cohort of our children stay with the same teacher from 0 to 5. So when you talk about nurturing environment and building strong bonds with someone who can help them grow,
The caretaker and
so,
peers.
but I think I leapfrogged a bit, so I just want to go back. So that's center-based. We have 345 children there.
Oh, and those look like classrooms. Like I hear center, like what's
yeah,
the center?
that's true.
Sorry,
Thank you.
they look like classrooms.
They're at your center
classrooms,
within
and they're broken up
classrooms.
into little pods with the kids. Yeah. All right.
And then we also have home-based, right? So we go out and we work with parents or caretakers like Eddie's abuelita, for example, and we send our teachers into the homes to basically help caretakers understand, and parents, that they're the first and most important teacher of their children, and how to use language more, and you know, invent toys, right? Like if they don't have the resources to do that. So for example, using dried beans in a Pringles can, for example, can be a baby rattle, right? So those are some of the industrious things that we try and teach, as well as bringing those resources to our parents.
That sounds great. And actually, we will get more into that, but you also brought a video for us today, and we want to take a look at that now. So please tell us about it, and we'll talk a bit about it afterwards.
Yeah, so the video that we're about to see is just a little bit of an introduction into El Hogar del Niño and some of the work that we do in the classrooms at the center. So it doesn't really show the home-based piece that we're talking about, but it shows a pretty good snapshot of what we do in
and just to add that, like as you're looking at it, I think one thing that really stuck out at me is that we'll look at some of the activities, like, okay, teaching a kid how to
Yeah.
use a spoon, like that seems so basic, right?
Yeah.
I totally get it. But again, if we're thinking about the synapses, like those are the things that they're learning, and the earlier that they're learning them, in a context that's nurturing, in a context that they're supported, those are the things that, while it seems small, those are the things that actually build up to longer.
And I just have to add one thing before you show that, which is related to this. It's critical.
Right.
In the 2 years that I've been there, when I would first go into the classroom, I would see movement, activity, action. About a year after being there and learning more about early education, I was able to see play as the tool that we use to train our children, to educate them. So I think that's what Eddie's point is. You're going to see play, but we look at, we take a social emotional approach in our classrooms, and these children are learning through play. So.
Okay, great. Well, so let's take a look.
Okay.
All right.
God has been in the community for over 40 years, and our interest is in serving you and your families. That's our core mission, and we love to do that each and every day. We'd love for you to consider God as a place to bring your children. We currently serve birth to age 12. We have an after-school program. We serve from 0 to 3 and also 3 to 5. So infants and toddlers and the preschool program. One of our primary goals is to ensure that your children are ready for kindergarten.
For us, it's very important to teach the children how to eat together. One of the reasons is that so they could share, not sharing meaning eating food, but also just to name the items that they're eating and also to get to know each other. Some of these kids come to the classrooms and they usually do not know how to eat or use the spoons. So one of the things that we teach them is how to hold their spoon, how to drink their milk, and also we also teach them how to use their hands to sign in case they do not know how to say, let's say, milk, more juice or more fruit. So they get the sense of them listening to us, and also in little by little they learn how to say the words that are needed in their vocabulary.
I think it helps a lot that a lot of the teachers are bilingual. It helps bring the culture into the classrooms, the home language. When the teachers know the home language, it helps them, the children, it helps them, like, I guess, feel more comfortable in the classroom because this is what they hear at home.
Considero muy importante que los niños de 2 años tengan la oportunidad de desarrollar su psicomotricidad. En este centro tenemos la oportunidad de ir 2 días por semana a esa área del gimnasio donde ellos desarrollan sus habilidades motoras, pueden correr, saltar, jugar, interactuar, socializarse más con cada uno de sus compañeros del salón.
Y además también ellos tienen la facilidad de expresar lo que dicen, lo que sienten y cómo están sintiendo la arena, cómo están platicando entre ellos, y tienen muchas oportunidades de realizar su juego en la mesa de arena.
Have the children explore nature and play and interact with each other. The garden is full of flowers that have been planted, and they get to see that. They get to explore the flowers, and we get to talk about them. And also, we have taken like parachutes or other things that we play with in the classrooms, so they can have a bigger environment to play with.
SUSANA, I work with the school-age children, 7 to 8 year olds. We work with children when they come out of school, we pick them up. When they come here, we give them homework help. We also keep up with the Common Core standards, and we try to keep them up to those standards, which are for literacy and mathematics. For this particular activity that we were doing, we were teaching them about the flower and the different parts of the flower.
I do a lot of activities where they work together, but I also try to make it fun, so I try to put a little bit of competition in there, so they don't know that they're building team working skills, because I set them up into teams.
So thanks for sharing that video. It's a good taste of some of what you're doing at Hogar del Niño. Certainly I hope it brings in more people to seek your services, or at least to learn more about working with their children. So let's talk more about what you offer. You said you offer those classes within your building, but outside your walls you also touched on that. You know, you have people going out, like you said, maybe talk to Eddie's abuelita and abuelito. How does that work? What's the structure of that?
So we have two basic programs that are outside of our classroom environment and in the homes. One is called Family Child Care Homes, and that is basically a caretaker who cares for, in our case, 5 or 6 children from within the radius of that home in that person's home. Okay, and then the second variant of that is what's called home visiting. So there we visit the home anywhere between 3 to 4 times a week, sometimes 2 to 3, and we work with a parent and help them to understand ways that they can offer an enriching environment to their child. So these are parents who are taking care of their children at home.
And just
ironically, we also call El Hogar del Niño, the home of the child. So
that's right.
We serve you in your home.
And not just at your building, but also within El Hogar. And just what are I'm sure some parents out there watching are probably asking, what are a couple of simple things I can do to help enrich that environment?
Well, I think one is language, right? So we talked a lot about that.
Reading to your
child. Lots of reading, lots of language.
And English and Spanish.
Okay, that's right. One thing I was going to ask, because some parents are like, well, I don't know much English, but I want my child to learn English. And so they kind of like cut the Spanish out.
So we're a bilingual program, right? So we teach everything both in English and Spanish. So our kids are fluent in both.
And so you would encourage them, whatever language they're using it, their own native language or whatever language they prefer, to use it as much as possible.
Yeah,
that's right.
I would. And this is purely anecdotal. This is my life experience. So my mom and my grandma and my grandfather only knew Spanish. So Spanish was certainly my first language, and no one was intentionally trying to teach me English at home. But the language came from the external sources. So it's in my estimation that, you know, maybe 80% or more than 80%, if you're here in the U.S. from a relatively early age, those kids are going to learn English, and they're going to learn it pretty quickly, because it becomes a survival thing. So I
and that's a foundation. The Spanish becomes a foundation for learning other languages.
Yes, for learning other languages, but then also actually, you know, not long term, but even intermediary, you know, Latin. So when you start getting into the sciences, you know, the Spanish base actually helps out with that. But back to the larger point, which is the building up the synapses. The more connections that those kids and those brains are able to make at an earlier age, regardless of whether it's in English or in Spanish, I think you're better off. And just one other thing that I want to point out to that, I think that this speaks to some of the work that we do at El Hogar, and maybe the differentiation between, you know, why don't I just leave off the kids with, you know, tia whoever, or grandma whoever, and consider a place like El Hogar is certainly all those educational benefits and the long-term outcomes. But when you're doing that, and whether you decide to check out El Hogar or not, is to look for organizations that have NACE accreditation. So that
tell me about that. What is that exactly?
So NACE is a body that qualifies.
NACE?
It's NACE.
Sounds like a girl that I had in my kindergarten classroom.
It's an accreditation body, and it basically segregates or preschools ranks them into different levels of quality. And so having a NACE accreditation is a really great indicator of quality. And so El Hogar del Niño has been NACE accredited for some time.
Because there's some that are not. And people, how do we know? How do we know which are the good ones and which are not the good ones? I mean, if we were to go into a classroom just for a small snippet for 2 minutes or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, there's a caretaker taking care of kids. But then again, because of the NACE accreditation, we are required to keep those ratios, to keep 12 to 2. and depending
That's
upon the
amazing.
classroom.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's, you know, like when that parent goes away, what if that ratio goes down to,
Right.
you know, 1 to 20,
Yeah.
you know, which is a lot of high schools. But anyways, that's a different developmental stage. Regardless, you know, we don't know that, and so that's why with having that sort of seal of approval, I think that really helps
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
differentiate programs.
Okay, we are getting close to
Yeah.
the end of the show,
Okay.
and there might be some people that are interested in you just as an organization. They might not even have children, or their children may be grown. How can people become involved with you or support you? Obviously, you have events to help bring people in. Tell me about that, please.
Well, I mean, there are several things. You know, one is checking out the website, which you'll have. You know, certainly calling the agency or just stopping by. We do visits every day. And we're currently enrolling children, and so we'd love to have a visit. We have an annual picnic coming up, and it's for our parents and families as well
That's
as
every
members of-
September?
It's every September, so this year it's September 13th.
Okay.
And it's going to be in Harrison Park. We'd love to see you there, and so
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
So, well, we're pretty much at the end, but let's tell us again what you hope parents will take from just knowing about young children.
Yeah.
Just
I'll
briefly,
if you don't mind.
briefly,
Yeah.
please.
All right.
Just one thing, like take action. That's the one thing that I want to take action out right now. Even if it's not with El Hogar del Niño, please consider, if you have a young child, consider looking into early child education program that's NACA accredited.
Okay. And we're going to have to end it there. But thank you so much for coming out today. It was great to have you here and to learn all about this.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about El Hogar del Niño and the great work we do in the community.
And to your audience, thank you for joining us. Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune in to Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.